Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to League Unlock. My name is Eric. Thank you for kicking it back with us as we are about to begin and embark on a long journey through the power rankings in the LPL. Yes, we're going to do all 17 teams in one go in this episode. There's a lot more teams in the LPL than there are in any of the other regions, and there's only going to be more. They want to get to 24 teams eventually. Still a few years away from getting to that point, but we do have a new squad coming in for 2020 that was not there in 2019. So 17 teams, it's a little bit odd, but we're going to go and run through them all. And coming in at the very bottom, number 17. It is a team you're not accustomed to seeing here at the bottom because they're one of the most storied franchises in the history of the LPL, but with a complete changeover coming into this year, World Elite are in at number 16. Mystic is gone to the Afrika Freaks. GA is gone to Dominus, but staying in the LPL. Even 957 in the top lane is retired and not returning. So all of the key members, all of the good things that you saw out of them in 2017 when they were a world-class team, long forgotten, long gone. It's all a new era for them, and I don't have much faith in any of the new players. They're all unproven. I don't know if they'll be able to be better than near the bottom of the standings in the LPL. 16 is Rogue Warriors, who were not fantastic last year in summer. 5-10. They weren't there in the playoffs, but they do have one star player in Jewuji, who we talked about a couple of times last year, and he is one of many incredible AD carry talents in the LPL. We know it is the most stacked region for that position. 2020 is going to be no different. Just don't think that he can carry enough of the weight to make this team even hovering around the playoffs, especially because a lot of teams did make at least some improvements, and at times Rogue Warriors throughout 2019 looked... People were comparing them to Rogue in the LEC in spring when they were bad. Not good Rogue in the summer split, bad 2-16 Rogue in 2019 spring. So I just didn't see enough happen in this offseason to make you think that they're going to improve leaps and bounds and be a team that's vying for anything even within the top 12, because it's still only 8 teams that are making the cut in the LPL for playoffs, which is not even half of them going there. Number 15 is Victory 5 or V5. Only the bot lane is returning in Y4 and Max. And they're kind of your typical mediocre team. They're not going to be around playoffs. They're not going to be at the very bottom. I see them being closer to the bottom than towards playoffs again this split. So they are in at number 15, and I don't see huge changes there. OMG are in at number 14. That is another squad that used to be storied and one of the greats in the LPL, but we're approaching half a decade since we've seen that happening. SMLZ is coming over, and Hacker, so they're going to be better than last year, and it's hard to be worse because they were 2-13, but those two suiting members already got some inherent synergy. That's an upgrade. They still have Icon in the mid lane, which, he's a little bit suspect, but OMG should be better than last year, but still number 14. LNG, they lost a few players, of course. SFM is a big loss for them. XX comes over from Top eSports, and Maple comes over from Suning. They were hovering around playoffs. They were great in spring. They had some upset potential, and they upset in summer as well, but I think SFM was so important to this team that they're not going to be hanging around playoffs next split. Number 12 is LGD, and last year was all about Kramer. They only won 3 times, which is absolutely criminal considering Kramer was at the very top of most categories when it came to AD carries last split, and this year Peanut comes in. Maybe that's enough to change something, but you remember what version of Peanut we saw with Gen G in 2019, and it was not very pretty. It was not worth the money that came in for him. And you can imagine LGD probably threw a lot of money his way again. They also have Kahlua coming in as support because PYL, who had been there the most tenured player with an individual organization, 7+ years. He was the starting support for LGD. People were calling for him to retire, hang it up after last year, and that's exactly what he did. He'll probably stay on with the organization in some kind of capacity, but basically, Kramer's getting a new support, which is exactly what you wanted, and he was able to put up such incredible numbers and incredible performances with PYL, who was clearly on the bottom end of supports last year, so maybe he'll be even better. Maybe this bot lane can really go toe-to-toe with some of the very best and not just rely on Kramer to completely pop off in some of these team fights. They should get more than 3 wins this split, and with Peanut coming over, I know the theme is a former world-class Korean player comes over to the LPL towards the twilight years of his career, but we're still only a year and a half removed from Peanut being still one of the best junglers in the world. I mean, with Kingzone, when he was on there, he was still very good. At least the first split, he started tailing off towards in summer when people wanted Cuz to be playing more, but I feel like Peanut could still get to a top-ish tier level of jungling, but LGD is still in at number 12 for 2020. And number 11 is eStar. It is the new kids, the new team, the new organization. They were not there in 2019, and the reason they're so high in their debut split is because the owner is PDD, who owns Young Miracles, who has groomed countless world-class talent. Ming was on there, Tian was on there, Ning was on there. All of these world-class players. Knight came through there. They all came through Young Miracles. PDD has an eye for talent, and 3 of the 5 members starting for this squad in 2020 were all on a Young Miracles roster. You have CJJ in the top lane, Cryan in the mid lane, Wei in at the jungle, and Wink, who was a former sub for Uzi on RNG. I expect good things from anyone who's played on Young Miracle before, and these guys have 3 of them, so who knows? Maybe they'll even be knocking on that playoff door, but ahead of 2020, we have them in at number 11. Coming up after the break, we move in to the top 10, and what exactly can Coma do with this very new look, brand new Vici roster in spring? Beautiful people of Earth, we have returned to League Unlocked. My name's Eric. Thank you for hanging out with us and blessing us with your presence as we're going through the preseason power rankings in the LPL. We are now in the top 10, which is where most leagues start because there's only 10 teams, but the LPL, we know, the demand for League of Legends is so much higher. The population, the number of people playing the game is exponentially higher than any of the other regions, so they get 17 different teams to go through. But in number 10, this is where we're getting closer to playoffs, and even some of these squads might be sniffing around that 8th spot. But number 10, we have Suning, who, much like pretty much every other team on this list, has made some kind of offseason changes. Maple is no longer with the squad. He moved to LNG. Sword Art is still there, and the big change, you remember last split, Angel was a top laner, but everyone talked about him being the better mid laner. Well, now they finally said, okay, Maple's gone. You can just role swap and actually play mid because you were our best mid laner throughout the split. And Weiwei was the jungler, and now he's going the path of score and role swapping to that bot lane. Suning was a team that had a lot of hype last year with SMLZ, Maple, and Sword Art. You had high expectations. They did not deliver on them. The expectations are not even close to as high this split, but they still have some solid players, and Angel performed really well. They're not probably going to be playoffs, and 10th is even generous. It's not a 10th that's close to playoffs, I don't think. But they might overperform, and really there's less expectations for them now coming into this split. But Angel did look really good last split, and Sword Art, he's still Sword Art. He's still a world-class support, even though he struggled at times on Suning. The most exciting roster and change in this group of guys has got to be Vici Gaming, of course. Coma comes over from T1, and you hear he goes to Vici, and Well, that's a head scratcher. What are you doing on this roster? They went 2-13. They were terrible. They were absolutely the bottom feeders last split, but they made a whole lot of changes coming into this year. They got iBoy from EDG, Forge comes over in the mid lane, and Chieftain comes from BLG. Chieftain did not start very much because you had Meteor on that roster, who was one of the 3 best junglers in the LPL. Now he gets the opportunity to start a whole lot more. iBoy can still be a fantastic AD carry, and with Koma telling him maybe don't Kai'Sa ulti into 5 members and die instantly, that should help them out. The Demacia Cup, they finished top 4, and something we've got to talk about, the Demacia Cup, if you're comparing it to the Kespa Cup, it means a little bit more when it comes to China over Korea because only the good teams win. You know how many teams have won the Demacia Cup since way back in 2015? It might have even been 2013. Only 3 teams have ever won. It's been IG, RNG, or EDG. Every single split, you're talking about one of these guys, or World Elite. They're the only ones that are winning. It's always the best teams in China that win. Sure, there are some surprise teams that get to the finals, but it's usually pretty good competition, much better than what we saw in the Kespa Cup. I don't know if people in China just take it more seriously, but it is usually the best teams going deep into the tournament. So the fact that Vici got to the top 4, they took down top eSports in 5 games before they lost to EDG. Forge filled in more than admirably for Rookie when he had his time away from IG. This team could absolutely make playoffs. The changes look great. Maybe Koma had some insight as to why he joined this team because playoffs do not seem that far-fetched for them. They did lose to EDG in Game 5 in that Demacia Cup, and EDG are in a spot ahead of them a little bit because of that head-to-head series win. It was close, though. It went the distance. EDG, big changes, of course. iBoy's gone. Clear Love is off the team. As a player, he's staying on. He is now going to be a coach for them, which you knew was probably going to be inevitable. Hope is the replacement for iBoy. And GG, they have 2 19-year-olds, so they're going for a youth movement for EDG. And anytime they have Scout, Scout, the inconsistencies weren't even there in 2019. He was just the carry, 1v9'd a lot of these games for EDG. Unfortunately, he's probably going to have to be doing that a lot more with this roster around him, but it is impossible to count out Edward Gaming, at least in terms of the LPL, probably still the most dominant team domestically that we've seen in China throughout its history. So you can't imagine them not at least making playoffs, but they are in at number 8. Number 7 is Dominus, who, you recall, these guys, a bunch of rookies made a splash back when they were the Sino Dragons. They've since rebranded to Dominus, and by the way, their logo is actually pretty friggin' sweet. The DMO, it's all a dragon made up through in it, so take a closer look at the Dominus logo. It's pretty slick. But the big offseason move for them was, of course, getting GA onto this roster, and they had a bit of a step back when it came to the summer split. They were looking great in spring, legit contenders for playoffs. They fell backwards in summer, but when you bring in GA, who, by the way, is an immediate upgrade over Twyla in the mid lane, Mark and Gala were pretty decent in the bottom lane. They're still developing, of course, but GA is a savvy veteran who was still playing at an incredibly high level last year for World Elite. He and Mystic were the only reason that they were a playoff team at all throughout 2019. So a big upgrade and somebody who can help groom these younger players and understand the intricacies of the LPL. GA has been around since 2015 now, when he made his basically incredible coming out party against the GE Tigers at IEM. He's been to a top 4 finish at the World Championship. He solo killed Faker, been to MSI. What more can you ask out of this guy? Well, it's to guide a lot of his rookies back to the playoffs, and Dominus should be a playoff squad just by adding GA, assuming that the step back in summer wasn't actually the level that these guys are going to be playing at, because you saw in spring the potential was there for them to compete with some of the top teams in the LPL. Feel like they can get that done here in 2020 with GA coming on to that roster. And a spot ahead of them, you had Vici Gaming, who obviously lost Kuro. That is the big offseason hit that they took going over to KT Rolster. But They got a more than serviceable replacement in Fofo coming over from the LMS to just completely scavenge and cannibalize that region even more. Probably the best player in that entire league coming over. I think he can absolutely fill the shoes of Kuro, and they still have Meteor in the jungle. The bot lane returns. BLG finished top 4. They lost to FunPlus in the semifinals of the summer split, and no reason not to think that this can be a playoff team again with Fofo replacing Kuro. Very excited to see him play in the LPL against some other world-class mid laners. Definitely think he will be able to hold his own. That's why they're in at number 6. Coming up after the break, we have the top 5. And can anybody dethrone FunPlus Phoenix? Should they even be the favorites? What is up, down, and sideways, all you lovely individuals? Welcome back to League Unlock, where we have reached the summit, the top 5 of the power rankings in the preseason for the LPL. It was a long journey through all these 17 different teams, and this is probably the hardest stretch to actually gauge because there are plenty of contenders for the title in spring, and there were plenty of moves in the offseason. Roster changes. You had top teams going, almost trading players, someone being rumored to go here and then not ending up going there. So it's a mess, at least within the top 4. But I think right outside that top 4 is very clearly JD Gaming, who the Cinderella run in 2019, they kind of backed it up at least a little bit. I mean, they took IG to 5 games in the Gauntlet run. The changes for them are Imp is retired. He is not returning to the squad. Loken returns to his team that he was on before. He went to top eSports, so now he's on JD Gaming. He's back. They also got Kanavi from Griffin in that whole debacle. He had originally been loaned there on this ridiculous contract. There was all the drama behind the scenes, but Kanavi is back, starting for this squad. Absolutely should be a playoff team. They still have Zoom and Yagao, which were their strengths. Zoom is still one of the best top laners in the LPL, so JD Gaming, they're kind of outside that A or S tier, but they're still right up there as one of the premier playoff teams ahead of 2020. Top eSports, the Night 9 show, who 1v9s a lot of these games. His buddy XX is out, but Karsa comes in what should be an immediate upgrade in the jungle spot. You have another year for 369 to develop. People forget he's still 18 years old and so young in his career. I don't know how you can be labeled a choker when you've only played for a year, basically. You can't be labeled anything yet. The big question mark is, of course, the bot lane for them, and that is because it is an entirely new bot lane, and it's a young bot lane. It's their challenger guys who are being promoted up to the big leagues. Fodic coming in, and based on the Demacia Cup, which is, of course, all we've seen from them so far, it looked like it was the night show again with this. I mean, this play was absolutely ridiculous. He literally goes in 1v4 and comes out with 3 kills. So Knight is absolutely insane, and that will probably continue to be the theme for them. The hope is that you can get a little bit more out of that bottom lane, because 369, at least in the regular season, was still rock solid for them for the most part. But early on, Karsa and Knight look like they have disgusting synergy already. We saw Karsa and Xiaohu. Xiaohu all of a sudden in the regular season throughout 2019 had his best splits since 2017. So when Knight's already playing at an MVP level, who knows what him and Karsa can accomplish. But because the bot lane is completely unproven on the bigger stage in the LPL, they're in at number 4. But this could absolutely be the year that if the bot lane lives up, because you know the 2v2s in the LPL are at another level than even other regions. But if Knight can get a little bit more help, then this team could absolutely capture an LPL title. And I don't want to be denied seeing Knight at an international event again, because you got to see him match up against the world's best from other regions. But TES for now are in at number 4. They could be climbing later on as the split goes on, but a spot ahead of them is RNG, the Demacia Cup champions from 2019, and they did it without Uzi. He didn't even play in the entire event. We know it is typical. It always happens that Uzi sits out for the first half of the spring split, comes around towards playoff time. But RNG did sign a more than serviceable sub in his stead. They got Betty from the Flash Wolves because the Flash Wolves went boom and no longer exist as an organization. Yet another LMS talent comes over to the LPL. Betty looked great throughout the majority of the run in Demacia Cup. He's not going to be as resource hungry as Uzi because nobody on the planet is. He's not going to be spoon-fed as much. Xiaohu looked pretty good when the knockout stage actually started rolling around. They took down JD Gaming and then EDG 3-1 in the grand finals to win the entire event. Losing Karsa is going to be a big loss, but XLB, Xiaolongbei, who just changed to XLB, and we thank him very much for that. It's a lot easier to say. That is another Young Miracles talent who comes in, the most hyped up jungler that wasn't already in the LPL, and he absolutely showed the flash and pizzazz that people were expecting. Fully expect him to continue that in the spring split in the LPL and be one of the best junglers, maybe even all-pro status in his first split. There's a lot of hype to live up to and a lot of expectations to live up to when you're playing for RNG. But the question marks are still there in the top lane. It's just Longjing who's there. They don't really have any subs that are coming in yet, so that's something they're absolutely going to have to figure out. Or maybe he just steps up to the plate and is great and can go toe-to-toe with some of these other top laners. But that's the question mark. And Xiaohu, the consistency. Is he still going to be playing at an MVP level for the majority of the regular season, or is he going to be playing like he did at Worlds, where he was outclassed by pretty much every other mid laner in that group? And because Uzi is still sitting out for at least half of the spring split in the regular season, probably, that's why RNG are still down at number 3, because can they hold their ground? Can they stay in that playoff fight while Uzi's sitting on the bench? Because usually they're more than able to do that. Invictus Gaming are in at number 2, and they are the huge question mark in the offseason. Where is Jackie Love? He's not re-signing because they announced their roster for 2020, and it's just Puff as the only bot laner that they are bringing. So where is Jackie Love going to go? That is still a ridiculous question mark. There were rumors he's going to go to RNG. That sounds insane to me, to have probably the 2 best AD carries on the exact same team. But the reason IG is still number 2 is they got an upgraded support with Southwind, over Baolon. Lian and Ning are still the big question mark, and Puff is going to be a downgrade from Jackie Love, of course. But you have more confidence in that bot lane than the one from TES, because Puff and Southwind were about the only positive thing that we saw last year from Vici. So they have that inherent synergy, and they will still be a more than serviceable bottom lane. Yes, FunPlus Phoenix are still number 1. Not only do they retain their starting 5 that they won a world championship with, but they bring in Khan from T1, and it remains to be seen how they're going to split time in the top lane. You can imagine Khan is probably playing more of the carries, Gimgoon tanks, but who knows how it's going to play out. But that should only be an upgrade and only make FPX even better. And as defending world champions, they should still be the favorites. By the way, it should be noted about the Demacia Cup, IG and FPX both took place in the event, but they did not field their starting rosters at all. It was basically 10 subs for each of them. So we still have to see these rosters play on the Rift. But that's all the time today for League Unlocked. My name's Eric. Thank you guys for hanging out as always. Catch you on the flippity flop.